Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to talk about exponential technology, technology that's accelerating at an ever-increasing rate of speed, and how it's affecting us now and how it's likely to affect us in the future. My guest is Kartik Gada, whose main area of expertise is the economic impact of technological disruption. Kartik is the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Economist of Singularity AIX, which is a large artificial intelligence company. He also operates an investment banking practice for AI companies. He's a co-founder of a market outperforming AI hedge fund, and he teaches classes on finance and technology at Stanford University. Kartik, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having me.
Now, it's true that technology is accelerating at an incredibly rapid pace, and one of your main interests is financial technology. So tell me, how does this growth in technology affect our financial outlook? How will it affect the way we do business? And will it add to the wealth of the average person?
So the accelerating rate of change is a mega trend that existed before humanity and has created everything about the modern world that we know today. Inherent to that is the exponential rate of economic growth, and associated with that, you have more types of financial instruments, transactions, greater wealth creation, economic growth, and so on. And a little bit later, I'll be able to show you how exponential that is and how rapidly things are advancing relative to historical norms, and how the modern age really is kind of getting into a very steep part of the growth curve.
Now, I think we have a couple of images that illustrate what you're telling us. Can we see that first image, please? Okay, there it is. So what is that telling us?
So this is a chart from Ray Kurzweil, and it lists a variety of historically important events since the beginning of the Earth, so going back 4.5 billion years. And the dots are very numerous because it is sourcing from a wide range of sources. Encyclopedia Britannica, Carl Sagan, historians, technology people, economists, and so forth. And the idea here is that you see an accelerating rate of change across all these independently selected data points because both of the axes here are logarithmic. The time between major events is getting shorter and shorter, and how recent the most recent major event was is also getting closer and closer.
Are these all human events, or we're talking billions of years?
Billions of years, so even before
geology.
Humans are only in the lower left-hand corner of that chart. But even before humans, the rate of evolution was always accelerating, more and more advanced species emerging in a shorter and shorter time, never derailed by even the most major extinction events. And the emergence of humanity, the most intelligent species, but also the newest major species, is part of that trend, and that trend is still continuing even as we speak.
So do you mean that rapid growth is sort of a characteristic of nature? Things develop, then it hits a wall, it gets set back, but it keeps on going to higher and higher levels?
Those are things that are now being explored. It is very hard to ascertain that because these are basic laws of nature in the code of DNA, but there is an accelerating component to all of that, because even when something had a huge setback, like a major extinction event that kills 99% of everything, the 1% that survives, it gets back to the trend line so quickly, and new species that were more advanced emerged to fill those ecological niches right away. So the trend line has never, ever, ever been broken in 4.5 billion years, and the emergence of human beings and the modern society of humans has also followed that trend line exactly.
And I think we have another image. Can we see that next image, please? Okay, so what does this image tell us?
So my particular specialty is the exponential rate of economic growth. The previous chart from Ray Kurzweil had some of the data to support this, but I think this is very, very underappreciated in that there's no subject that affects the financial well-being of everyone at all times more completely than this. Yet there's extremely few people writing about it. Probably 5 people have written something substantive about this in the last decade. And it shows that the exponential rate of economic growth, and we have centuries of data, there was almost no economic growth until the year 1500. Then it started at a very slow rate, like 0.1% a year. By the 19th century, 1% a year. And by the mid-20th century, 3% a year. Now, anyone who follows economic news thinks that 3% a year for the world growth rate, or even the United States growth rate, almost same as the world, is a cruising speed. But there's no way a 3% a year growth rate could have started, say, 2,000 years ago, because how many times would it have compounded over 2,000 years at 3% a year? So the growth rate is rising, and just like 3% would seem very fast to people in the 16th century who were under 0.1%, we are about to go to a higher growth rate than that relatively soon, just by continuation of this trend on this chart.
So when you talk about growth rate, are you talking about industrial output, the total sum of all products manufactured and sold, basically?
The sum of all products manufactured and sold, but also the living standards of people. Now, this chart depicts GDP. That is not the perfect metric for a couple of reasons, but it is the most widely used metric, so we are displaying that over here. The reason it's not the absolute perfect metric is because technology is deflationary in nature. GDP, the way it's calculated, rewards you for using more and doing more with that, whereas technology is about doing the same with less. So a major technological disruption actually gets underappreciated under the GDP metric, and that's how the rate of change is even a little bit faster than what GDP would depict.
Well, one of your main areas of interest is also artificial intelligence, and we're talking about finance. So how would AI applied to finance affect the average person, like me, for example? What effect would I see in my life?
The list is very, very long, but some good examples are there's so much artificial intelligence in, say, the stock market that it's very hard for humans to be stock pickers anymore, and I recommend people not do that anymore. But at the same time, the costs of so many other transactions, brokerage costs, wire transfers, bank fees, all could be much lower because of the insertion of artificial intelligence into that. Similarly, if you have autonomous vehicles, which is another form of artificial intelligence, not only is it convenient that you don't have to be the one driving, but there'll be a lot fewer accidents. And even for those of us who aren't in accidents, we pay auto insurance that is calculated based on that price. The price of auto insurance could fall by 60 to 70% very quickly, just because when enough cars are autonomous, there'll be a lot fewer accidents, so that cost isn't being passed on to you.
You mentioned stock picking a few moments ago. Do we want to have programs that try to beat the stock market? And what if different companies have these competing programs? Are we treating the stock market, which represents the industrial strength of America, basically like a giant gambling casino where it's dominated by programs that don't have the faintest concept what a company is or any idea about products? It's just a bunch of mathematical equations, and they're gathering all the money into one little pot on their side.
Yeah, so the majority of trades in the stock market are already done through AI. Any rapid trade, known as high-frequency trading, most definitely does not care about the underlying performance of the business or the fundamentals of the business. So that's a bit of an issue because it is making money based on trades in a fraction of a second, a fraction of a dollar per share. It's doing all that. But there are new ways for humans to make money, like my own hedge fund, which you mentioned in the intro, never buys any individual stock. It's just the index and AI to use options algorithms to get a market outperforming thing. And because it's AI, we have low minimums and low fees at a level that was not possible in the industry today. So what happens is, yeah, AI is creating a lot of velocity in the stock market and a lot of churn, but by pushing humans out of that, it has lowered the cost and accessibility of new things that increase human wealth as well.
Now, one of the big problems in the modern economy is the fact that everything is based on debt. Most governments borrow money at high interest rates to perform their functions. Does AI offer any hope of getting off of this huge indebtedness? Is there anything we can do to get off of having to borrow money for our basic expenses?
So AI does create the opportunity to stop doing that. It still has to be a conscious decision by humans and the governments that are run by humans to do that. For example, the United States national debt is more than 100% of GDP right now. That has not caused the collapse that was predicted 15, 20 years ago when they said, oh, we'll never get to this level without a problem. That's because of the exponential rate of economic growth, because the future value of US GDP as measured today allows that amount to be easily accommodated, and therefore we have not had that problem. At the same time, by testing the limits and not caring until after it's too late to do something, we have not only squandered that buffer, which we could have deployed somewhere else, but under the current track, we seem like we're going to really test what that limit is. If it's not 100% of GDP, 150 or 200, we don't have to drive off the cliff, but at the moment, the humans still have to make the conscious decision to pull back and be fortunate that the limit was higher than we thought.
Because the interest rate is probably not going to shrink, but industrial output could be affected adversely by any number of possible causes.
Yeah, when there's volatility and uncertainty in the market, there could be short-term changes in industrial output. Interest rates will always trend lower and lower, but that has been abused in the sense of borrowing more and more because of that. Therefore, we have failed to use the benefit of lower interest rates that are pushed by technological deflation to that lower point. So that very lucky bonus has kind of been squandered, so to speak.
Now, another area where AI is very important is in the field of medicine. Better diagnostic tools, maybe speeding up the development of new pharmaceuticals that work better and are a lot cheaper. How is that going along?
So there's a tremendous amount of data in medicine, and we know that one size doesn't fit all in terms of pharmaceuticals, surgeries, treatments. Studying a person's genome, studying just the data that is generated from all of their tests, lowering the cost of tests so you can do more of them and get more data and catch things earlier. Like people say, we should have a cure for cancer. Well, we'll have a cure for cancer when scanning technologies like MRIs are 1/10 the price and 10 times higher resolution, then it'll be part of everyone's checkup and every tumor will be found where it's very small and can just be zapped percutaneously. You're in there for an hour. That's when cancer will be stopped early enough. The accelerating rate of change is bringing these innovations faster, and even if some medical treatment doesn't exist today, people can see, well, it may exist in 3 or 4 years just because the speed of delivery is very high. Similarly, the speed of pharmaceutical discovery can be made very high with artificial intelligence because the molecules get more and more complex, but you have AI cracking all of that and therefore accelerating the delivery of these innovations faster and faster if the regulation isn't artificially delaying it.
So you can model what pharmaceuticals are likely to be able to do, eliminate a lot of possibilities.
More customization for the individual. What works for me may not work for you. It depends on an individual's human genome, their ethnicity, their stage in life, what they ate over the last 3 days. All those things are not taken into account. Doctors today are still operating with very blunt instruments and a lot of guesswork, and more analytics and more data will enable much more precision, which has tremendous benefit because there will be earlier detection, fewer side effects, lower cost.
Do you think it might be possible with artificial intelligence to get to the point that nobody gets sick anymore? Because there seem to be as many sick people today as there ever were, despite advances we made. Is there something inherent in human life that attracts sickness regardless of your technology?
There is an inherent tendency, I would say, of some people to, well, perhaps indulge in things that may not be as healthy. That may not go away. In fact, artificial intelligence and this new medicine might allow people to do more of that before they have a problem. But at the same time, the cancer example I gave, there's a very finite point at which you can say there won't be new cancers. People who are advanced cancer, yeah, there may not be something for them, but there won't be new people getting cancer because it'll be part of your annual checkup. Whatever that is found at a very early stage will just be eliminated and you won't have to do anything. So that is something that certainly could be possible within even just 10 or 12 years.
Now, one area of medicine is genetic engineering, changing the human genome. We have the capacity to edit the human genome. The fact that we're able to, does that mean that we should do it? And what are some of the risks if we do that?
The ethical questions are very complicated, but as with anything, people will find a way to do it because everyone wants an edge over other people. We have been genetically engineering livestock, crops, pets for a very long time. When it's possible to do that for humans, and even if it's outlawed in the United States, people who want their children to be better in every possible way, like top 1% intellectually, physically, everything, will simply fly to another country, like, say, China, pay out of pocket and do that. As we've seen, parents are willing to pay a lot of money to bribe college officials to just get their children into a certain college. So if that was happening, I would have to imagine there's no reason this sort of thing won't happen.
Now, if we can modify the genetic structure of a human, does that change what it means to be human? Are we trying to evolve into gods or something like that? I've heard people like Ray Kurzweil say that the humans of the future will seem like gods to the people of today. Usually every attempt by humans to elevate themselves to the level of gods has ended badly. Are we heading for a similar thing?
So I'm a little bit skeptical about how far that would go. Certain human augmentations will certainly be available, like bionic arms, artificial organs, personalization of education to make people intake knowledge faster, but there's a certain limit that it cannot be pushed past because under the accelerating rate of change, you can see that intelligence has always been getting more and more advanced for 4 billion years. Humans are just the most recent evolution that there will be something after that. Now, do we evolve into that? That's what Ray Kurzweil is saying. Or is that something that emerges from artificial intelligence and we're just the number 2 species after that? That's possibly more likely just because artificial intelligence can adapt in a way that's already faster than human beings.
Do we even understand what intelligence really is? I've heard it defined as the ability to solve problems. Good memory is considered an important feature. Ability to form patterns, but do we have a clear definition of what intelligence is?
We don't have a clear definition because it's very human-centric. They talk about AI doing things that humans do. But AI has a very uneven ability to do individual tasks. Like, for example, when did AI become better than humans at doing calculations? I'd say 1974. You know, a calculator could do square roots, cube roots, all those things instantaneously, which humans would take a long time to do. That's been true since 1974. But at the other extreme, comedy, I don't think AI can make jokes that we would find funny necessarily, so it's still nowhere there yet. So, and every other type of intelligence falls somewhere between those two extremes. So there are things where AI is already thousands of times more efficient than humans and other things where it's nowhere close at all. So the different axes, a different type of intelligence altogether. The human type of intelligence is therefore not the only one. There's many types and other ones that we may not even have envisioned yet.
Now, some people are worried about being replaced by computers. They're saying that, you know, if a computer can do anything a human can do and more, then why are humans more valuable than computers?
That's the one thing that has never worried me, and that this trend has always been going on. For example, in the United States, in 1840, so 180 years ago, 70% of people worked in agriculture, some of them not voluntarily. Now 2% work in agriculture, yet the amount of food produced is more because they used automation, they used better techniques, machines, and so forth to do that. Yet there's many more jobs in the United States, including in manufacturing, but certainly in services than before. Similarly, even now, we have created 20 million jobs in the last 9 years or so, and everyone says automation will take jobs away, but I say automation creates more than it takes away, even though it's eliminating certain existing jobs. New jobs and new categories of jobs are created all the time because there's one very simple way to think about it. Anyone's job that was eliminated by artificial intelligence, that means their employer, their boss, is saving all that money. What is the employer doing? They have high margins, or they're hiring someone in a task that has not been automated somewhere. Therefore, a person who's been automated should immediately start competing with their employer. Similarly, an entrepreneur needs fewer people to execute a certain business. Instead of hiring 10 people, maybe they only need 4. Therefore, they break even sooner, and therefore more types of businesses become viable. So any automation, artificial intelligence, increases the types of businesses that can form to a much greater extent than that.
So what are some of the tasks that humans are capable of doing that a computer could never do as well?
Well, some aspects of interpersonal communication or business dealing are something that humans will still want to do with each other. I talked about automation in financial services, but the implementation of AI to lower costs and create more products that can be mass market relative to just ones that are available to, say, the very wealthy, that process is made more fluid and faster through artificial intelligence. So product innovation, product marketing, these are things that will always keep happening. And there's new professions that will be created altogether. At some point in the near future, people who are generating data of value will be able to get paid for the data that they generate. Some people might say, well, how do I generate even more data and get paid even more? That will become a secondary activity that people do, because when they are generating data and are instructed how to generate a greater quantity and quality of data, then that's a form of moonlighting that they may very well do. And so they're pursuing an activity they would consider fun, but if it's generating enough data, then that pays for itself, and some people could just do that. So it's not even a leisure class. Their leisure activity is self-financing because of the data being generated. And that's already happening to some extent through social media, but this could become a much more broad thing.
Now, another area of technology that people are very interested in is robotics. Back decades ago, this was really science fiction. Now we have robots that can do all kinds of things. So what are some of the interesting uses that are being made of robots today that people wouldn't think of normally?
So a robot is merely artificial intelligence placed into hardware. For that reason, it doesn't advance as quickly as the software-only AI, but there's many types of robots that have migrated away from the human form, for example. Like if you want a robot that washes the windows on a skyscraper, which is a job a human shouldn't do, it's very dangerous. You could have a robot with 8 arms, but only weighs a few pounds, and even if it falls down, it's not heavy enough to kill someone. Robots in space make a lot of sense. I'm actually a believer that humans will not be colonizing space in huge numbers in the foreseeable future, because the way to explore space, to gather knowledge, is always going to be through robotics and artificial intelligence, because the robot does not require air or water and can survive in a much wider range of temperature, pressure, gravity, radiation than a human, and it doesn't have to be brought back. And it can be upgraded wirelessly while it's in transit. So therefore it has a cost advantage of thousands, if not millions, over an astronaut going into a module. It could be this small even. So space exploration will be almost 100% robotics, and it'll be a robot that is either very small, a shape that we don't see as comparable to humans, and maybe hundreds of identical robots sent in multiple directions. That could happen too.
I've also heard of swarming robots that operate on a principle similar to an ant colony, and the human controller doesn't have to tell each individual robot what to do. He gives a command to the swarm, and each member of the swarm knows what to do to complete the overall task.
Know what to do, and some of them learn from each other. One thing that was interesting is that there was a manufacturing robot that was released very recently. It was a generalist robot, and the product didn't do that well, a little bit ahead of its time, but what happened is it learned how to do things by itself, learned how to do something with one hand. So that wasn't the most profound piece of that. What was more profound is all of those robots, the thousands that may have been installed all over the world, they're all connected to the cloud. Therefore, if one of them learns something, all of them learn something simultaneously. Humans can't do that. If you learn something tomorrow, you cannot just download that to me in a few seconds. I have to learn it on my own. And that is how you get a much faster and exponential diffusion of technology and increase in robot capability that is human surpassing.
Now, there's another type of robot, which is a flying robot, generally known as a drone. Now, drones have great capabilities. They can hover for a long time. They're great for surveillance. They have high-resolution cameras. They're in contact with the ground. Obviously has a lot of benefits, rescuing people, firefighting. They're also very easily used as weapons of war. Gives you a great advantage on the battlefield, and they're cheap and easy to produce. One of the big questions about drones is, in a war situation, should you give the drone the authority to decide when to shoot, or should only a human make that decision? And where are we heading on that?
So drones, as you point out, have so many different applications, at least 20 that we could rattle off. In a battlefield sense, that becomes the other ethical quandary. Is the AI installed in the drone going to be accurate enough that it shoots the right person, not the wrong person, or doesn't conversely fail to shoot the right person when it has a chance? Now, humans do make mistakes too. There's always collateral damage and errors when humans make those decisions. At the moment, there's always a human in the background, but as drones become cheaper and therefore more numerous to produce, and sometimes even smaller, they may not be controlled by humans, because there might be 500 drones that are only the size of an insect, and people don't even notice because they think it's a moth or something. But it is either conducting surveillance or can fire a projectile. And eventually that decision is delegated away from humans.
Now, one of the concerns is that there are very deep divisions in the human race. There are a lot of hostilities. Some people say, well, technology will erase all the boundaries of nationality and religion and ethnicity and all that, because everyone will receive the economic benefits and they'll all be happy and the world can be united. Other people say, no, that's a myth. These divisions are real and permanent. Technology doesn't make them go away. But the destructive power of technology in the hands of people who really can't stand each other can be, catastrophic. What direction do you think we're heading to in that?
So that is a very frightening thing, because even, let's say, 20 years ago, if you could have predicted that by 2019 we actually don't have an act of biological terror or chemical terror or even nuclear terror, most people may not have taken that bet. So it's inevitable, anyone can access all of these things. But at the same time, greater prosperity as well as greater safeguards have caused a general decline in the amount of war and amount of murder. Terrorism hasn't gone away because that isn't for necessarily reasons of poverty in many cases, but there's greater security capable as well, like blockchain technology, distributed ledgers can install a greater sense of security that requires more people to break in more systems. For example, you could have blockchain that can disable a firearm if enough people in the vicinity, like in the instance of a mass shooting, enough people in the vicinity say disable this firearm, maybe it disables it after the first 2 or 3 shots rather than 50 shots. So those technologies kind of increase safety even as more weapons become more commoditized and accessible to smaller groups of people with smaller budgets.
So do you think that technology ultimately makes us more safe instead of less safe?
It makes us more safe, but it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back to some extent, and it's harder to keep up with what is going on. And that's why it's confusing to a larger range of people, because the amount you have to know just to keep up and to make yourself more safe is rising and becoming more complex.
Now, you wrote a book not too long ago. We just have about a minute left, called Atom Singularity 2050. Just give a brief summary of what that's about.
So that
quickly.
book, ATOM, A-T-O-M, stands for Accelerating Technomic Medium. And it is a description of the accelerating rate of change, particularly from an economic sense, and how technology is creating so much deflation in the economy that it is meaningfully distorting all economic stats. And this is proven by the fact that the central banks of the world have printed a lot of money. The official term is quantitative easing, $25 trillion, and this has not caused inflation, even though formal economists will tell you, well, it will cause inflation any day now, but for 9 years it hasn't. I think the numbers match up exactly, and I provide a lot of data for that. And this is wonderful because we have a new layer of financial flexibility in our government and our policy. For example, if you believe AI and automation is doing more and more work, it should take on a greater share of taxation. Therefore, AI would fund more and more of our tax burden, enabling the income tax rate on humans to become less and eventually zero and even negative.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop right there, unfortunately. I'd like to thank my guest, Kartik Gada, talking about exponential technology. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman, and we'll see you next time. Okay, very good. Good job.
Thank you.